This episode of the Building the Future podcast is very educational and entertaining. It truly defines what this show is all about. It's learning more about our industry, it's growing professionally, and it's networking throughout the different communities, and having a little fun along the way. As together we are building the future. This is the Building the Future podcast. I am your host, the lumberjack, Brett Thorne. On this show, we explore topics including construction, building materials, real estate, remodeling, the housing market, industry news, new products and trends, technology, government, everything you need for building the future. Welcome back to the Building the Future podcast. As always, I am your host, Brett Thorne. And the purpose of this show is all about learning and developing and growing in our industry. And tonight's topic is nothing short of that, as this is something that is very green to me as it plays into the industry. And that is the art that goes into the structures and buildings that we design and construct. And with me tonight, here to educate myself and all of you on this topic from 9.arts, I have Martha Weidmann. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Brett. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Martha, let's get started let's familiarize you with the listeners just a little bit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into where you're at today?
Sure. Well, I am Martha Weidmann, the CEO of 9.arts. We're an art consulting company based in the U.S. Our headquarters is in Denver, but we work in 35 different states and 5 different countries. We've completed 825 commercial real estate projects, and those, range from mixed use to master planning to multifamily, hospitality, public space, and healthcare. So a bunch of different industry types. And what we do is we help to add value to those properties and those projects through a unique art experience. It's a really niche business to be in this particular field of commercial art consulting, or corporate art consulting, as some call it. And in this business, you can take many different paths to arrive at this place. My personal background is in the arts. I am a trained artist, and I took sculpting classes. We were just talking about your wood lumber supplier, lumber. What do you call it? Lumber yard.
Yes,
Your
yes.
lumber yard. And I actually have fond memories of going to, pick out really beautiful pieces of wood to carve when I was in school. So I've studied all different types of art from around the world, been somewhat classically trained as an artist, and then found myself in an opportunity to pursue this path in business, which has been extremely fulfilling because we're able to provide opportunities for artists to continue their creative careers and to grow the work that they're doing and to bring value to the built environment.
So you're an artist yourself then, to some sense, correct?
I am. Mhm.
And it sounds like you said you've picked out some wood, or did you say you do some sculpting and stuff? What's your forte? What do you specialize in?
I would say most artists, when you are going through art school, when you're formally trained, you actually have to learn a number of different media to complete your degree. So, I've been trained in everything from drawing to wood sculpting to painting and in oils, acrylics, watercolors, and photography. My concentration was in photography, so I actually know some really antique, almost outdated. I have some pretty outdated knowledge on photographic processes. I know how to use 5x7 negatives and shoot on the old Toyo cameras with the accordion style tripod setup. So I learned darkroom photography. So you can imagine that things have changed quite a bit since I was in school.
Well, I was just getting ready to say, when I was in school, I took a photography class myself just because I loved it and I enjoyed it, and more for my own personal growth and learning. And it was darkroom. So I'm like, I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but and I loved it so much. I mean, the darkroom was just such a tranquil place, and I mean, I really enjoyed, going there and taking doing the exposures and creating the film and then, putting it in the baths and, watching the picture appear and just, I mean, it was just such a relaxing time.
Absolutely.
Kids these days have no idea about that because everything's digital and you go through and you just touch button, you get to change all the colors and everything's done. You're like, wow, that was easy.
Well, you know what's cool, and a lot of people don't even realize it, but everything in the digital world, it's based on what we were doing in the dark room. So, even the color coding system, CMYK and RGB, and those systems are all used digitally now, but those come from film-based systems and light exposure systems that were all manual. Even in Photoshop, some of the tools that you have in Photoshop, they're darkroom techniques that we were doing by hand that you can now do with a digital wand on your computer.
I remember all the fadings and all that stuff as you're trying to do it, and then you'd have to go through and you'd have to expose the or I don't see. I don't even. It's been so long, I remember all the terminology, but then you'd have to basically get the exposure to come out on the paper to see that. Well, I didn't do that one very good. To have to go back and redo the whole thing and just keep doing the process. It was a very time consuming process. There was a lot of um, that art took a lot of skill, and I was never very good at it. That's why I only did it one semester.
Well, I don't know how old you are, but when I studied darkroom photography, and then by the time I got to college, I actually had a job. I worked at the newspaper for the university, and at the newspaper, we got digital cameras. And in the classroom, in the fine arts classes, we were still on everything darkroom, negative based, all old school technology. And I feel like as I'm either like the youngest Gen Xer or the oldest millennial. And I just feel like we've been on this cusp of technological changes our whole lives, with things that were in this craft, a kind of a craftsman method that you would learn or do by hand, to then, just watching the internet change the world around us and seeing tech and innovations optimize how we can do business. So I hope that we can continue to maintain as a culture our appreciation for handmade things while also enjoying all the leisure time now that you have, that you don't have to cut out with a little X-Acto knife every single corner, or you can press a button to overlay two images instead of having to do it with two negatives.
Yeah. No, so we're right there around that same era because I know exactly what you're talking about, where we are kind of the link between, some of the traditional what were then the traditional ways to what now are the new modern ways of doing things. Because technology at that time, was very young, it was very green. It didn't have a lot of basis in the any of the fields really.
Mm-hmm.
So we're one of those lucky. Well, I call us lucky because we have got to experience both. We get to see the old and use the old, and then get to see the new. And you actually truly value the benefits of the new from that. Where some of
Mm-hmm.
those that just know the new, they don't realize. You know, I had a conversation. It's completely off topic of that, but it's all about technology. I remember I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and like, how did anybody ever get picked up in the airport before cell phones? I'm like, I don't remember how we did it, but somehow we did.
Oh, you just go and wait. You just wait. You just
Yeah, you had to schedule in advance and let somebody know when you were going to be there, and they were gonna have to call the airport and check with the airline to see if it was on time. So it was a lot. Everything just took a lot more time.
There was a lot more waiting.
Very much so.
I remember the world before the internet, and I feel like there's going to be a certain point where, they're going to call us up and they're going to be like, what was it like? What was it like before the internet? Like, yeah, we just waited around. And you know what? Here's the other thing about life before the internet. If you didn't know something, you just like didn't know it. And you'd have to ask your uncle or look up the Encyclopedia Britannica or, try and find a copy of something at the library that could tell you. But for the most part, if you didn't know something, like access to information was hard, so people could fool you all the time. I don't know about you, but I feel like I got told some wild stories. I could have fact checked so many things that I just let slide.
Yeah, I mean, then you didn't know, and you were comfortable not knowing. You just that was a way of life. You just said, "You know what? I'm gonna have to go to the library, and I may or may not be able to find it somewhere in the library. It's probably there, but the ability to find it is not. It's not at the touch of a button anymore, or at least it wasn't then. You actually had to go to the what was it, the Dewey Decimal System that they used
Yep.
to card catalog and all that
Mhm.
stuff for books. I mean, yeah, I know, I know, I feel your pain. Wow. I don't know if these are good memories or nightmares or what, Martha, but you're definitely taking me down a road here.
I know, we all know how to use the card catalog. I don't know if we
Mhm.
should keep that for posterity or we just, like, make space in our brain for something else now. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone needs to hang on to it.
Yeah, those may be, historic art pieces soon, who knows?
That's right. That's right. There's actually a couple of museum curators that are working on collecting artifacts from the coronavirus pandemic. So, all these little kind of strange things that have grown to become normal in a time like this, like masks and hand sanitizer and gloves and newspaper articles showing about the toilet paper shortage, all these bizarre things that we're going to look back on in 30 years and go, can you believe that happened?
Oh, yeah,
You
and
know?
you and it really has. I mean, this pandemic has really put the world at a tilt in so many different ways that, I mean, it really has written its own pages in the books of history. I mean, this will be something that our grandchildren's children will talk about. These kind of instances don't happen on a regular basis. I mean, every 100 years, is that what they say? The average something like this happens. I don't remember the statistics on it, but it's not a frequent thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I can see how there's going to be people that are going to collect things and talk about this because this is truly something that is monumental. I mean, it's not a good thing. I'm not I mean, I'm not sitting here saying, "Hey, this is great to happen," but this truly has affected everybody in some way, some form or fashion.
So how has the pandemic affected your business specifically? I'm just kind of curious.
Honestly, and I've said this on many of my shows and a lot of people I talk to, our industry has been very fortunate. It has really accelerated our industry because you've had so many factors that have gone into it. One of the very first factors, I mean, we were scared like everybody when it first happened and nobody was going to happen. We had about a 2 week lull there where everything just got quiet and we're like, oh boy. And the building materials industry, I don't care if it's commercial, residential, or whatever, back in the 2000s with the recession, the Great Recession, I mean, our industry got hit the hardest. Of course, the whole driver of the recession was the housing bubble bursted. Well, obviously, so the housing bubble, I mean, things were great. I mean, when that bubble was going, but when it popped, I mean, guess what? That pendulum comes back a long way. So our industry got hit really hard then. So this time, luckily, and I am very I feel terrible for the hospitality industries and the tourism industries and all those that are really struggling now, but our industry has done very well. I think a lot of it too as the driver was people had to shift their life so much because everybody's now at home. Well, they're sitting in their living room for 12 hours a day, every day, and they're like, "I really don't like the color of this room." Or kids are not in school anymore. They're in the house now all day long. We need
Mhm.
to finish that basement because we don't have enough room for our family now, or we've got to build that deck. So you had a lot of little projects. There was a lot of honey-do lists that got done.
My house got so
Yes,
much smaller. I don't know how that happened.
exactly, yeah, and then you had just now you've got these low interest rates because, obviously they're trying to bring the economy back, they're trying to lift it back up. So now you have these record low interest rates. So now everybody's like, now's the time to build. So everybody's trying to get a house built. So our industry has done very well throughout this pandemic. I mean, it's been a struggle though. Don't get me wrong. There's been a supply issue. Has been I mean, an absolute nightmare because all the mills are shut down and all the factories are shut down, and COVID has done this, and the getting the raw materials from overseas or from wherever has just been everything's been setting in boats out on sea, because they're letting them quarantine out there and all this other stuff. So it has been a struggle, but I would say silver lining, our industry has done well.
That's great.
So How has it affected the artistry? Obviously, you and I were talking about, you had your own art show because it was just you and one other person there, but how else has it affected the art industry?
Well, so to think about, I went to an art show the other day, which was great. That's kind of what we do for scouting for new talent. So I was
Mhm.
out. It was actually an organization called Union Hall that we helped to found with a developer about a year and a half ago. And so when you think about Nine Dot Arts, one thing to remember is that we are associated with large scale, multi-year commercial projects. So we're art consultants for these really, large scale developments. Sometimes we're doing 30-year art master plans, So the work that we do is has such a long tail that for us, any big economic recession, it takes about 6 months for it to really show itself in our business. So we, right when things hit, the biggest thing for our company was to figure out how to transition everyone to work remotely. So it wasn't really a slowdown in what we were doing. We didn't start to experience that until around September, October. And now we're actually starting to see things come back because commercial lending is beginning to pick up again. Our work, because it's commercial, a lot of times it's associated with commercial lending. So, are the banks willing to lend for these new projects? And 35% of our revenue last year was from hospitality. And so that a lot of that was front loaded to the first part of the year. So all the hospitality projects that were financed just kept going, and then projects that we're trying to get out of the ground, new builds, the ones that were able to get financing and continue were multifamily. So then the rest of the year we saw a big uptick in continuation of multifamily. We've got some corporate office projects that are continuing to renovate or build new while things are kind of calm out there, and in the hopes that when they open again, that people will be ready to come back and return to downtown offices. And the other thing that we saw was that our government contracts that we had we were able to finish what we had started, but we're seeing definitely a shift in completing the work that we had pre-pandemic, and then what the new contracts look like. The face of them is changing. We really have seen multifamily and senior housing kind of take the lead in terms of new deals on the horizon. So that's from the revenue impact side. It's just been kind of a shift into different industry segments, and the ways that it affected our day to day. We were able to do our creative work primarily from home. So all of our staff have been remote. Some have even moved to different cities. We've really switched our whole company culture to focus on that remote culture. And the artists that we work with over 10,000 artists around the world. And so artists have been at home, contained, and not always able to use their large scale, kind of massive studio spaces or fabrication spaces like they had previously. So we see a lot more artists making small works, works that you could make at home on your dining room table, or little works that maybe don't take as long but more of them, things that you would have to do when some of the artists that we work with have kids at home. So what kind of art can you make at home while you're also folding laundry, cooking soup, and homeschooling, like, and doing math class for a fifth grader? So it started to really, like, the scale in which artists were producing work at this time got a little bit smaller. And the supply chain, though, has been really open because we work with local artists where each of our projects is located. So supply, like to acquire the goods that we need from each artist, has been no problem at all. The only things that have slowed down on our supply chain are framing moldings, like the actual
Mhm.
wood moldings. A lot of times those are coming in from other countries, and that shipment cycle has slowed down because the demand has picked up in the US, and the shipments are slow. So that has kind of put this lag time on framing. So now we're just looking at alternate solutions. Instead of doing a traditional frame, do you do a work on canvas? Do you do it, sandwiched between plexiglass, or what are the alternative options? Do you do a dye sublimation print on aluminum? So we've got different options for dealing with any sort of supply chain issues because our resource pool is so vast.
Now, has it freed up some time? And I know that those that are the full-time artists, like you talked about, they obviously have a lot more on their plate now with the kids at home. They've got to work out of their living room and all that. But what about those that are maybe the artists that maybe aren't full-time artists that maybe had other jobs that
Mhm.
maybe they were furloughed from? Has it freed them up some extra time to focus more on their art and their passion? And
Yeah, well, if you think about, artists, just it's not a general rule, but pretty universal in that most artists create work as a way of expressing things within them, and it's their way of communicating. And so as an artist in a time like the one we're in some cases, communicating through your artwork is one of the most healthy ways to process the complexity of what's happening in the world around you. So we've seen some people have become even more prolific because the need to produce, like the drive from within them, has amplified during this time.
okay, sure, yeah, a lot more emotions maybe driving that. And again, this is like I said, this is green to me. I am a sponge tonight. I am taking all of this in.
Well, I mean, think about it. It's like even if you were, carving wood or cutting wood or crafting or whatever, you know, when you get into any sort of process that is working with your hands, it has a meditative quality to it. And I do believe that people are really starting to dig deep more into kind of quiet, meditative or introspective practices right now, whether that be, whittling or home renovation projects or home improvement projects. We literally can't travel the way that we used to. And that could be for a number of different reasons, whether financial or just, safety concerns or whatever the case may be. But we're everyone in the world is home more right now. And so what are you going to do with that time? Well, if you're an artist, most likely you're going to be making something.
Absolutely. So now that we kind of have a good background of the art side, and you've kind of told us that, at Nine Dot Arts, you guys do primarily commercial projects and stuff.
Mhm.
Can you walk me through the process of, start to finish, how Nine Dot Arts fits into the whole process of a new commercial structure?
So when you are putting together, big commercial project, let's say you've got an $80 million building. In those early stages, you're going to put in some kind of big buckets to finance a really large scale project. And you want to make sure that you get things right every step of the way. So early on in that deal structure cycle, you're going to want to bring in and establish the right members of your team to carry you forward. So we're typically brought in at a similar time to when you might have your architecture firm at around 60% schematic design. You're bringing in your architect, maybe your urban planning team, and then we'll come in as part of the design team to really help bring those themes to life. It all starts with an early stage vision, and from that vision, we develop a project roadmap. We then research and curate the artists who are going to match that brand vision and that brand narrative for that particular property. We move into our acquisition stage. So we have a whole team that just handles acquiring the works from all the different artists around the world and then tracking their progress for anything that's custom made for the site. And then we go through installation and engagement. So 4 stages: vision, curation, acquisition, and installation.
So really, you guys are involved every step of the way from the very start. Like you said, they've got a vision that they've got an end goal and end vision they're trying to do. So you guys are involved from the very beginning because you have to understand what it is the final project needs to look like, and you have to be working the entire time so that when it does come time for the installment of the art and the finished goods, you're prepared and everything is ready to go.
Absolutely. And it's more than just putting a painting on the wall. We're talking about how are we going to create an immersive art installation? How are we going to make sure that there's structural supports embedded into the building to support the 500-pound sculpture that we're going to hang from the ceiling? What does RCP look like? What are the electrical plans? Do we have lighting in the right places that's built in? You don't want anything to look like an afterthought. This is very comprehensive, thorough. Really, it's a placemaking strategy. It's a creative placemaking strategy to bring culture, life, and value to these buildings.
Yes. When you take it down to its basics, it's just a building, it's just a structure. It's all the art, it's all the decor, it's the harmony inside of everything that makes it what it is.
And not only is it that extra oomph, when you're there on the site, you can feel it when there's, something that's handmade. You can see that when something's handcrafted and well done and thoughtfully integrated into the space, it has a feeling. It has a feeling of thoughtfulness. And not only do you get that feeling, but you also, with a really thoughtful art program, you can actually embed your first wave of cultural support for this new project. So if you think about it, if you're using local artists, who are going to be the first people who come to visit that building? All those artists. Who are going to be the people posting about it on social media? All those artists. Who's going to be bringing their friends to that brand new bar to check it out, and bring their visitors to that hotel where their artwork is on display, or to that alley, where their mural is on display? The artists are going to be the first ones who then become your champions for the future. So it's not only about just getting that built environment right, it's laying the foundation to bring social capital to the table.
And it sounds like, and I'm gonna make an assumption here, that the projects you're working on, these are all unique individual projects. These aren't, large scale hotels that are gonna be plugged into 35 different cities throughout the US, correct?
Well, what's interesting is that sometimes we are hired by uh, large corporations who are going to open 40 branches, and they hire us because they don't want to be cookie cutter. They're going, we've got to open 40 branches, and we want each one to feel like it's a part of that community. And that's our problem to solve.
So that is, would you say that's your niche and your forte?
We definitely have a niche for supporting large scale brands or boutiques, but the niche is creating a localized project specific brand identity through the art program.
You even say it so much better than I do. I just said niche and you say niche. I mean, that just goes to show.
That's so funny. I didn't, both are entirely acceptable.
I hope so. Because
Absolutely.
I'm sure mine's not right if they're not.
Tomato, tomato.
Perfect. Wow. So, I mean, really, I mean, and this is again, I mean, and I have been in this industry my entire life, and I'd never really thought about it from that much detail, but I see exactly where you're coming from and how critical all that is to give that true life to that structure and that building to that final outcome to really get what you want out of it, your intentions, that you really do have to be so involved every step of the way. Like you said, even the lighting and the planning and the structures and the everything to hang and all that. I mean, that is quite an undertaking. So, as far as Nine Dot Arts, that is obviously what you guys do. What else do you guys do?
Focusing on commercial real estate projects is definitely that's our bread and butter. So within that realm of multifamily, healthcare, hospitality, office spaces, and big, public art master plans, that's really what our focus area is. But to do that well, we have to be connected to the entire arts community, not only in the US, but around the world. We have to have our fingers on the pulse of what's happening. So to be thought leaders in in that industry, we did a couple things that I think are really helping to set the stage of what's happening in this particular field. So number one, we built an app called Dotfolio, and that's where artists can upload their portfolios of work to share with our curatorial team. That's really grown, and it's become a way for artists and these commercial businesses through our curators to be able to connect with a really broad set of talent. And then secondly, we just started publishing the State of the Art report. We published our first one last year. It's an annual report that's documenting trends happening in arts use in different commercial real estate applications. And so we'll continue to publish that into the future to document what's changing, what's happening, and to find out more about how people in real estate value and utilize these creative placemaking approaches for their projects.
And if people want to find out more about you and your company, what's the best way to do that, Martha?
Well, definitely check out our website, NINEDOTARTS.com. So 9.arts, all spelled out. And then, of course, if you have any questions for me or if you'd like to reach out, I'm on LinkedIn, Martha Weidmann. It's spelled Martha the traditional way, and then Weidmann is like WeID man with two N's. You can find me on LinkedIn. Be happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
And I'll add all that into the show notes. But Martha, I want to be respectful of your time. Before I let you go this evening, do you have any closing thoughts for the listeners?
Closing thoughts. I feel like this moment where we are right now, I feel like a lot of hope for our industry overall and a lot of hope for our country. I feel like as a global civilization, we've just been through a really hard, dark moment. And and a lot of people are still in that. But I feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel. And so if you're out there, if you're in a position that's hard or struggling, change is coming and there's good things ahead. So light at the end of the tunnel. That's what I'll leave y'all with.
Perfect. You really educated me a lot here on the process and how it all works, and I love how you guys work with your local artists or the artists that are local to those communities and stuff to really give that life to those, and I had never thought about the connection, but as soon as you said, what, the artists are the first ones that are gonna be there when it's their work on display, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, there's obviously, they're gonna be there. They're gonna be the ones
Right?
that are out there on the rooftop screaming about it, saying, 'Hey,' you know what, bringing their friends, telling about it, sharing it on social media." That is such a phenomenal way to really get that message out there. I mean, that is such a warm idea in all honesty. So, Martha, thank you so much. You have taught me a lot, and I know my listeners will feel the same. This is the Building the Future podcast. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe. Please like and share. You can find out more at our website, www.buildingthefuturepodcast.com. Together we are building the future.